Alright, good evening everyone. We'll just give it a minute for some people to tune in. Sorry we've started a couple of minutes late today. A chilly afternoon in Melbourne, unfortunately. Alright. Good boy, Abraham. Alright, let's get into this. Alright, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to go over and discuss today the videos, or tying together the last two videos we've talked about over the last 2 weeks, which has been the section 1958, section 462 of the Victorian Crimes Act, which covers the use of force, and the use of force continuum scale, and how all of that works together with either attacker subject behaviour. As a quick recap, just looking at section 462A was a person may use such force not disproportionate to the objective as he believes on reasonable grounds to be necessary to prevent the commission, continuance or completion of an indictable offence, or to effect or assist in effecting the lawful arrest of a person suspected of committing any crime. So we went over just quickly how that meant not excessive or not extreme force as to what you're trying to achieve. And that being lawful, what you're trying to achieve. And we went over the use of force continuum scale, covering how we went from presence, communication, soft empty hand, filled empty hand, soft intermediate weapon, hard intermediate weapon, and potential lethal force, meaning how we went from simply presence, which meant just being there, communication, the type of communication ideally to be using, soft empty hand being very soft, obviously gentle pushing, touching, hard empty hand being more your locks, joint locks, restraints, takedowns, punches, countermeasures like blocking. Soft intermediate weapon being the presentation of the weapon, hard intermediate weapon being hitting with it, and potential lethal force being, well, as it sort of states, potentially what you're doing will kill someone. So tying all of that together, looking at it lawfully, we want to look at the behaviour of the person and what we're trying to achieve. So what we will look at is subject behaviour or aggressor-attacker behaviour, and how that escalates, and how with the escalation of that we will be escalating the use of force lawfully. So what we're looking at with subject behaviour is you will either have compliant people, passively resistive people, actively resistive people, assaultative people, or deadly force. So looking at that, if someone's compliant, obviously you don't have an issue. Passive resistance is just verbal non-compliance, refusal to move, just refusing to follow commands, refusing to follow direction. Active or resistive active resistance is where if you go to move someone, they're not striking you, they're not hitting you, they're just being passively aggressive. They're like this, if you go to move someone with arm drag and they go like this and they clam up or they sit down or they grab a pole or whatever, and so they're actively resisting you, but they're not assaulting you. And next up the scale of force is assaultative. So now you are looking at, it's not passive resistance like this. It's hitting at you, kicking, punching, pushing, and then potential or deadly force. So now you're looking at the person has knives, guns, bats, multiple attackers, or as we stated in the last video, as we've seen with coward punches, even one hit, blindsided, or even not blindsided, can potentially be deadly force, which is why we always try to avoid situations, physical violent confrontations. So if we're looking at this and looking at law, we will start moving up the scales and discussing where we will use the use of force continuum. So if someone's compliant, as I said, there's no real issue here. You're having a conversation. You may not agree. It may, but there's not an issue. Simply put there, you've got communication and presence. That's all you'll be using. They're compliant. That's not an issue. Moving up the scale, you've got passive resistance. So again, you're going to be using your presence, communication. You might possibly here start moving into soft, empty hand, where you may have to touch the person simply to get their attention, or a gentle push to get them shepherding or moving out the way. Moving up the scale again into passive resistance from here. Again, you're still going to be using your presence, your communication. From here, you're going to start possibly soft, empty hand, but more application of your force and a push, or possibly starting to move into your hard field hand. Now, we're not talking extreme bang, but it may be a harder pull, a harder push. You know, you're starting to move into maybe restraints, locks, trying to move the person and manipulate their body, their joints, and the way you're getting to move, depending on what you're trying to do. Now, if they're assaultative, obviously, communication, you're probably going to skip your soft, empty hand. You're not really going to be using a non-aggressive application of force here. Once you move up to an assaultative person or a subject attacker, you're moving into hard, empty hand. So from here, you will be striking. It's hard force now because the person isn't resisting. They're attacking you now. So there's a big difference between resistive and assaultative. And you really have moved into using your takedowns, your punches, your blocks. So you might be blocking, kicking, and restraints if you have to stay or can't leave. From here on, you even maybe moving into a hard intermediate weapon. Depending on the situation, you may be using something like, you may have had something in your hand like an umbrella or a tactical pen or whatever, and you may now be moving into using that to defend yourself, to block their strikes or hit them and get moving. Then we move into deadly force or potential deadly force. And from here, again, it's usually a mixture of hard, empty hand, intermediate or hard intermediate weapon, and potential lethal force. So you're starting now, you're hitting hard, and you are trying to hurt the person or disable the person to the point where they cease to attack you. So you're not looking at, when I say disable the person, you're not looking to make them a quadriplegic or a paraplegic or something, but you are looking to cease the attack. So you're looking to have them stop the attack. Now, if that means, for instance, you've punched, you go to back off, but they're attacking, they may end up, say, with broken bones, cuts, lacerations, up to, as it states, potential lethal force, depending on what you're using and on the situation. So, to put all of this into context with Section 462A, it really depends on what you're doing. For instance, if you're walking through a shopping centre and it's crowded, there's not a threat. The people, I don't know how would you put it, not even passively resistive in a way. Most people are quite compliant, but they may not even see you. So again, you're going to use a gentle push on the hips or a touch on the arm and a move out the way. If someone's down in their phone, so they're not looking to hurt you here, they're just, you might just gently move them out the way and keep moving. If you find yourself in situations where people are getting pushy, you're in line, you're at a concert, situations like that. Again, this is non-aggressive stuff. It's your use of force in these situations is going to be your presence, communication, and really your soft hand skills. You're just moving people away. Then you're going to move up, for instance, like if you've found yourself in a situation where there's verbal abuse or someone's verbally very agitated and aggressive. Again, you're going to be keeping distance ideally. But if they come charging in at you like this, you're going to start upping your application of use of force. So you may be soft, empty hand, but it's not going to be a gentle touch on the shoulder. It's not going to be a shepherd or a guide. From here, it's going to be a harder push. You're really starting to move up into, because they're being resistive, and it's getting more in the higher end where they're invading your space, they're getting aggressive. It's going to be moving somewhere between like open hands, so you don't want to be actively striking and hitting, but you're moving between soft empty hand and hard empty hand with harder use of force, harder application of your force, and like open hand strikes of chest, pushing back and stuff. Now, it's if the person becomes non-compliant, so under law now, they're assaulting you. Well, technically speaking, it's assault to yell at someone or threaten someone, but it's become to the point where they're assaulting you. So from here, obviously, you are going to move up the use of force scale, and legally speaking, if you can't leave, you do have a right to protect yourself. So self-defense being really, you cannot leave, you've exhausted your options to leave. For whatever reason, you can't get away. In which case, then it becomes self-defense. If you have options to leave and fail to do so, it's not really self-defense. It becomes more of a fight and assault. So anyway, if the person comes in, they are actively now hitting and a danger, you've got to move up that use of force, and you are going to be using strikes here. Now, whether they be harder open palm slaps, grabs, eye gouges, or closed-fisted hammer fists, punches, or even elbows and things like that. The point is your application of force now is going up, and it is legally covered by the fact that you are looking to stop a crime. So any person may use such force stop the continuation, completion, or commission of a crime. So that offence is assault, and you are physically at risk. So now you do legally have the right to stop this offence of assault. So when it comes to this point, I should point out the use of force you're using is enough to stop the offence. So if someone comes at you and you go boom once and they back off and they stop, you stop. Yeah. If you sit there and go, yeah, well, I'm going to show you now, bang, 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 then you've now crossed the line from the use of force. You're no longer using a reasonable amount of use of force. You've now gone and you've become the person committing the crime, being assault on that person. But that being said, if you hit the person 2 times and they're still coming at you and they go to grab you a bear hug, then obviously you're going to continue with your use of force, and you're going to keep going until the threat ceases to be a threat to you. In the case of upping the ante into potential lethal force, obviously if there's multiple attackers, that means you're going to be hitting a person, moving. You're going to hit the next person, move. If you get hold of if you've seen them coming and you couldn't escape, and you've already armed yourself, say with which would be soft intermediate weapon, where you've presented something, say you've seen them coming, you've looked around, you can't get away, so you've grabbed something, you've armed yourself, and you've gone, okay, stay away. Multiple attackers, you might boom, 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 move to the next one, bang, bang. Okay, and if someone's on the ground, you might stomp just to make sure that they stay there, because what you're trying to do is get away, stop the attackers. You've moved into potential lethal force here, so it's a point where, again, you don't want to kill someone, but you're trying to stop the threat. If it's multiple attackers or something, obviously the force you use by law, it would be considered not excessive or extreme, and it would be considered quite reasonable to be using quite a lot of use of force in the situation where you're dealing with multiple attackers, a person with a weapon, depending on how committed your attacker is too, for instance. And size comes into, weight all comes into play here as well. So if someone is strangling you, you feel your vision just go, because if someone's got you choked, strangled, you got about 3 seconds if they really know what they're doing, and that's it, you're done, you're out. So Obviously, in a situation like that, your use of force is going to be quite a lot harder. So boom, if you grab someone by the head and just into their eyes and squish, or if you scoop at an eye and do some serious damage to them, obviously, if that went to a court, they said, well, why did you scoop the guy's eye out? You know, he said, well, they're choking me. I had 3 seconds. I was on my back. The guy had 20, 30, 40 kilos on me. It felt like he was trained. So I did what I had to do. Once I got him off, you know, boom, I gave a kick. I backed off, looked around, and I got out of there. That would be considered quite a reasonable use of force. People aren't going to sit there going, well, that was extreme. However, if someone sits there from across the road, for instance, and says something disparaging about your mother, then you walk over, snot them a couple of times, you know, throw them on the ground, stomp on their head, kick them in the head. Obviously, nobody's going to argue, or everybody's going to argue that that was quite excessive and extreme. So what we're looking at is what you can justify as being reasonable, not excessive and not extreme. So, like again, going back to the thing, if you're in a crowd, moving through people, someone's on their phone, and you're just having a bad day, they're on their phone, they go to walk into you, you know, and you've used your soft, empty hand to shepherd, no one would consider that assault. That would be considered quite reasonable. If they're walking up to you like this, you're, oh man, I've had enough of this, boom, then obviously that's very excessive and unreasonable. So when we're looking at putting the law together with the use of force scale, what we're really looking at is justifying the behaviours of other people and the force we've used, and then sitting there and explaining how that force was reasonable and not excessive, not extreme to what we've done and why we've done it. So, look, again, the reasons to use force is really to stop a crime or to stop someone or yourself being hurt. Other than that, there's not a great real reason to be applying force unless you're looking at reasons like, say, combat sport, where there's an amicable decision to use force, which by law is perfectly fine and very acceptable. Other than that, outside of law or outside of agreements, there's not a great reason to be using a lot of use of force in reality. And if you do use it, you certainly need to be able to justify why you have used that force. Otherwise, you will be looking at charges of assault, bodily harm, or, you know, heading down those routes and all the things you do. And obviously, if you can't explain the use of force and the justification for it and why it wasn't excessive, you really are going to have a hard time keeping yourself out of trouble in the court of law. So that really is how looking at the Victorian Crimes Act 1958 section 462A ties in with the use of force continuum scale and how it works together to give you an idea of not overusing your force for any time you would have to use it. Anyway, I hope you found this beneficial. Any queries, questions, leave them in the comments. Be very happy to answer them. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, stay safe. Thank you for watching.